Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. First, Coach Derry is back for another episode at co-hosting. Coach, welcome back.
Hey, appreciate it.
And then we have a special guest today, Coach Cody Alexander, the co-defense coordinator and safeties coach at Mesquite Horn High School in Texas. Coach, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me on.
No problem, Coach. Like I said, we want to kind of get you on, pick your brain about some things, but for some godly reason, if somebody doesn't know who you are in the coaching world, which I highly doubt, can you give a brief background on kind of where you've been and kind of what you kind of got known for?
Yeah, so I GA'd under Phil Bennett at Baylor University, and then from there I kind of started. I went back to the high school level, and I got into a situation where I needed to kind of get some creative juices flowing, and I've always wanted to be a writer. Didn't necessarily want to write, like the next Harry Potter. So I just was like, I'm gonna just start writing about football and throwing it on the worst place you could possibly do that, which is the internet and Twitter. And so it started picking up. I started getting, some people to like my stuff. And then eventually, I match Qtrs is what I author, and it kind of blew up, and it's kind of opened up a bunch of pathways for me and a lot of resources. And it's really been a fun journey really for the last 5 years. I put 5 books out. I put my last one, Anchor Points, out middle of January. So it's been really fun. And that's kind of where it all started, was just I wanted to learn more about the game, and kind of put my thoughts down on what I thought, defending modern football was, and kind of what we did at Baylor, defending our Braille system. And from there, it just kind of grew.
Now, I mean, you mentioned Phil Bennett there. We'll kind of hit that before we get into the actual defensive stuff. What did you kind of take away from working with Coach Bennett during your time there at Baylor?
Yeah, I think run fits. I'm a secondary guy just by trade, and then that's kind of where my passion lies, especially the cornerback play. But that was the one thing that he harped on me the most, was just kind of that attention to detail. And I think run fits just in particular. There's not a lot of gray area in them. You got to fit the run, and you got to be detail oriented, and how you coach it, and how you get from point A to point B, and stop different things. I think that to me is just kind of the thing that's always said. He's always. We used to sit. It used to be just me and him, and Jim Gush, who's with him now at North Texas. It'd be the three of us just sitting in the meeting room together, and just being able to soak up that. And the one thing they always preached to me was be a complete coach. If you're gonna do this, do it the right way. Know the front and the back. Because they knew I was a good DB coach, and I knew what to do in the back end. But that's the big thing. Even I talked to him. In fact, I talked to him in December, and that was the first thing he even asked me. It's like, Cody, how you doing? And I'm like, I'm doing good. He goes, now you still know how to fit the run, don't you? And I was like, yes, sir. I still know how to fit the run. So he checks in with me every once in a while. That's usually I get something about better know how to defend the run.
Okay. No, that's an interesting little aspect. So how much is that when you're, obviously you're a match Qtrs guy, but when you're looking at your coverages and all that stuff, how much where do you start with that when teaching your kids in terms of the run fits versus the actual coverage responsibilities?
Yeah, I think most guys, if you go and you look at the elite level coaches, they're starting back to front anyway. I think they're trying to, how can I get the nickel out of the fit? And really, I'm a little different. I wrote this in Anchor Points. There's a whole chapter in Anchor Points about run fits, and I kind of went over my philosophy versus lever, spill, lever, and kind of the spill overlap that you see in the 3-4, and just kind of the one thing that I learned from Bennett is just in the modern game, it doesn't matter. You want to eliminate space. That's the thing that when you go up against Art Briles all the time, you want to eliminate space as much as possible. So if I can force the offense into the boundary, then I'm going to do that. One way to do that is keep your nickel out of the fit all the time. Now that's easy to do in a 4-down, like 2x2. You can always set the 3 technique to the field. So we would have field call. Now, if you do that all the time, you're gonna get some different things. But as a base, just camp rule of trying to fit things without the nickel, and how can you get the safety from the table, which is 10, 12 yards deep. How can you get him involved in the run fit without slamming him down in the fit like you see in some of these single high teams, or in some of these where they push everything out. I'm not a big sling the fit guy, just in the sense that if you set the back to the boundary and I set the 3, I've got everything over there, and now I'm taking that same linebacker from the space and I got to slam him all the way down into the B gap. I mean, to me, Art Briles is one of the first people that started doing the flop read stuff. Big 12, where I cut my teeth was at the very beginning in 2011 in the Big 12. People were already doing the flop read. They were doing the vertical option routes. I mean, all of this stuff that you're seeing now that's basically commonplace in all of football, that's stuff that Art Briles was doing in 2011. So, I got indoctrinated in basically modern football 10 years before it actually hit. So the way that I look at things is a lot different than other people, and I'm okay with that. That's one thing I always took away from Briles. He used to always say, we can either be the exact same as somebody, and if we're going to do that, we better be elite and we better be better than them, or let's be different and let's teach our kids a different. Let's think outside the box and have different answers to the same problems that other people are having. Because I think we get in coaches, we get such a survival bias, and we want to be cookie cutter, and we want to run everything the exact same way as some of these guys do, but we don't have the talent to do what they're able to do. Mm-hmm. And so you got to kind of think outside the box in different ways, and to me, that's kind of what I've always taken with that. And the biggest part of that is keeping that field covered down to where I'm not giving any just what I call gifts. I'm not giving you the gift of space.
Okay. No, good. I mean, so I'm going to kind of get into it, and me and Coach Derry will start like rotating questions here. Is obviously, there's been a, how do I want to say this, prevalent movement by defensive coaches to either some sort of bear or 4-eye front. I think that's kind of been the answer for a lot of coaches for like zone to a point. I think the bear, because of obviously Bud Foster, who I talked to a couple days ago, and then the 4-eye has been becoming extremely prevalent. So with those changes, how have you seen offensive coaches shift to now attack those in response to defensive coaches attacking the offense with those fronts?
Well, I think 5 years ago, nobody even knew what duo was. I think you would just call it inside zone.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's, unless you were privy to what was going on in the NFL, in some of these power run games, like some of these kind of NFL style run games, you probably didn't even know kind of what duo was. You probably just said inside zone, or it's just load zone. You're just sitting, everybody's just kind of stepping one direction, kind of down, and you didn't really know the rules, or you didn't really understand that. And I think now with everybody plugging the B gaps, teams are having to find ways to attack downhill a little bit more. Gap scheme, buck option. I mean, not buck option, but buck sweep has become a lot more prevalent. Pin and pull has become much more prevalent. And I think that's something that you're seeing kind of across the board. People are more interested in pin pull concepts. People are more interested in duo. People are more interested in kind of these vertical games where I'm attacking downhill. And really, talking to people that live in the tight front, I mean, they know, like, if I don't have a guy that can contain the B gap, I'm just going to get washed anyway. And so, how can we counteract that? I mean, you go look at Georgia this year, played a massive amount of 4 down. Louisiana, which is another tight front school with Tony down there, they kind of come from that Aranda tree, a massive amount of 4 down. I think that you go and you start looking, a lot of these guys are starting to shift back to some 4 down stuff, whether it's personnel or it's just kind of the run game that they're seeing. And the irony in all this, if you talk to offensive coaches, everything is always drawn up to a 4 down because it's easy. The angles are there. The angles are simple. But on top of that, I think now people are going back to a 4 down instead of it being that static 4-2-5 quarters look. They're understanding, look, if we're going to go 4 down, we got to move guys around. We got to be more fluid in the front. We can't just be, you've got this gap, everybody's gapped out. And then now that's when you get in trouble with the bubble and things like that. And so to me, I think that's kind of that evolution piece is that as people have gone more to this tight front, is that now offenses are starting to get a little bit bigger in the way that they attack you. We're seeing 11 personnel now as the new 10 personnel, from a decade ago. More people are starting to experiment with 21 and 12 personnel, especially if you've got some bigger bodies that can play tight end. So to me, I think that's that I talked about it in hybrids a couple of years ago. I said, we're going to start seeing more 12 personnel and hybrid 21 personnel stuff, because as more people get lighter and they get faster and everything starts getting condensed, they're going to want to try and start hitting those edges. And as people know that run the tight front, you basically have to blitz into bear. And now they're trying to attack those lighter edges now on the tight front than normally you would have in a 4 down.
I mean, I think it's really interesting, especially good at the college level, how, well, it's just common physics of football, right? It's all about angles. And, I mean, you get that full eye, it was, revolutionary. But then, they're going to get good at it. You look at it 5 years ago, that goal line fade killed teams. And now you got that chest-to-chest technique, and no one can run goal line fades unless you have like a 6'6", like a Kyle Pitts receiver out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to do
it. You know what I mean? But, for the most part, you used to be able to throw a goal line fade to anyone in college, and it's almost impossible to defend. So, I think it's really neat. And I actually am a big Kirby Smart guy, so I actually watched 3 or 4 games, and I was kind of what you said. I was a little shocked to see how much 4 down front he did. And I think a lot of people got away from 4 down because you were balanced, but sometimes you were too balanced, right? You could just kind of, like you said, you flip the 3 technique to the field. You kind of knew what you were going to get from a front. And I think offenses got really good at attacking that. So, what's your adjustment? I think a lot of people went to a 3 down tight. You know what I mean? Because you can still roll down to mint and all that good stuff. But I thought I like your analysis in terms of, where the ball. And I think, pin and pull is probably one of the most common plays. And I think
because
it's so you don't need a wash. And I think split zone is killing tight front teams, because I think tackles are getting really good at washing a 4-eye tech. 4-eye was so big because it was a horrible angle for any zone, right? It's
right, yeah.
Right there. It's hard to get that momentum, but I think you've seen it so often, and they rep it so often now. So when you run that split zone, man, that cutback lane is just excruciating to defend. When you get that sniffer back kind of right there. I'm a big Ohio State guy. I watched Ohio State completely wreck teams this year running split back zone, and so I kind of agree with where the game is trending, and I think I've looked at a lot more 4 down stuff this year because I ran into the same problem, and I think it's still somewhat hard to defend, have an outside apex player come and fill a C gap consistently. In college you might not see it as big of an issue, but I think that's still a big issue you run, and if you don't have that's the problem when you go away from 4 down front. You don't have a C gap player on the line, man. It's hard to have a force player effectively.
Yeah, I that's the other thing too, is a lot of 4 down guys want to single gap everything. They want to play that heavy technique, or they're kind of like with the saving Jimmy Pony stuff. Even then, that was one thing that we were a little bit different at Baylor. And kind of what I learned is that heavy technique was a normal technique. Some other people call it splatter or fist technique. And to me, that was kind of a normal technique. But like with anything, if you do it enough and you close that B gap enough, you're going to start getting manipulated and things like that. So I think the biggest thing to me, if you're going to run the tight front, you better have some sort of 4 down stem, or you better be able to get into it. And I think if you can teach it parallel and make it easy for your defense, I tell guys all the time, if you want to run tight, all it is an under front, but you're taking that 5 technique and you put them in the B gap. So what you can do is in that sense, you can teach them parallel with each other. Like your kids already know if you're a 4 down, they already know over and under, right? So they already get that concept. So now hey, we're going to put in the tight front. All we're doing is we're just taking that 5 technique. We're putting them in a 4-eye, and you can either head up the nose or shade the nose. I know some guys like a shade. I work with guy. Yeah, Bennett was a shade guy. Bennett loved a shade guy because it pulls that guard, and then anytime your line movement, you're crossing the face of the center, that pulling motion was always there. So, whatever you want to do, you've taught it in a way that the kids, it could translate throughout your whole scheme.
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head too, which is and the one thing I've really tried to get away from us. I've only been coaching for 6 years now, but 6 years ago it was all about your gaps, even in kind of like an odd front to a degree. And I think the one thing that when I became a DC, I never taught you had this specific gap. You're just teaching, like you kind of just said, and that's why I like a shaded nose. So my inside linebacker knows that if my guard pulls, because we face a lot of gap scheme, my guard pulls, he knows what person is coming to block him on the other side based off our defensive alignment. If we're in a tight front, he knows that no one in theory is blocking him. So if the offensive coordinator knows what he's doing, he's a conflict player now. So I always tell him to kind of squat and condense, you know what I mean? Play the RPO and reality to the ball, But if we're in a under front and now the tackle, you know what I mean? Now the tackle's coming to block you, you got to go. So other than that, I think not getting out of teaching gaps and just teaching. I've never seen a guy fit an A gap. I get four front guys do that, man, but that A gap changes so fluidly.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I've never been around, and I hate the concept of our linebackers having one gaps. Because, the ball is going to be ran away from you, and you still got to fit that gap.
100%.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you. I'll never teach. I'll two gap all my linebackers, and I'll say you, but it's not even a teach them a gap. It's just it's a run rule. Like if you're the backside backer, you'll cut back. If you're the play side backer, I'm a spill guy. I said you just wipe over top, scrape it's the tightest, and tackle the ball that gets spilled. You know what I mean? Rather than teaching, all right, you're C to A or B to B.
Okay. And then I kind of want to start drifting this into how you attack sprint outs. Because, that's a conversation me and Coach Derry have had a lot this offseason one-on-one about, obviously, with me not being an offensive coordinator, I'm looking at a lot of sprint out stuff. And I'm looking at a lot of stuff, really. But sprint out, kind of moving the pocket. And then he's looking at how to defend it. Because we have a lot of teams, league I used to be in that he's still in, the NBL. That's how they deal with a lot of their arm deficiencies in the league is – try to move the pocket, try to throw flood or comebacks or whatever you want to call it. Those are kind of the main concepts. So what is your preference from a coverage and pressure standpoint to attack some sort of sprint out, probably trips or a 2x2 motion, trips?
Yeah, my biggest thing is that the way that this is why I like Qtrs so much is that the mic is always going to have three. So if the running back blocks, then I'm going to go meet that running back. I'm going to go set the edge. I now become the force player on that sprint out. And that allows it really alleviates that stam or that nickel. Now he can expand with that motion. So that sprint out motion that's coming with him, now he can expand. I think the biggest thing, too, with that sprint out is teaching that nickel not to move up towards the line of scrimmage. I got it from a buddy of mine, Jed Kennedy, who's down at Enterprise High School in Alabama. He calls it the cough technique, curl over flat. And so, to me, I tell the kids all the time, cough it, curl over flat. And I've always said it, don't take negative routes. Don't take negative routes. Don't take routes under 5 yards because they're just bait routes. Anything under 5 yards in an offense is a bait route, unless they're just running mesh and they're trying to get the shallow across and they're just trying to race you to space. So, to me, anything that's pushing horizontal towards the sideline, I don't want to take anything under 5 yards. And I want to stay on top of it. I want to let the ball bring me down. This isn't a quick screen. So it's not like they're running a bubble or they're running some sort of a switch screen and I've got to trigger now to make sure that I'm there as soon as that guy catches the ball. So as I get that sprint out action, I want that Mike backer hitting that outside shoulder of the running back. Make the running back block. Whether you're sending pressure and it's a normal passing down or they're sprinting out, I want the running back to block. Running backs don't want to block. They want to carry the ball. Or they want to catch the ball now. So to me, I think that you want to I'm telling that Mike linebacker, I want you to go hit his outside shoulder. That quarterback cannot get outside of you. And then obviously don't climb. It's the same time, same kind of concept with your pocket of, I don't want to climb past the quarterback, especially when they're runners. You want to sit and make that guy contain in a bottle. So I'm going to hit that running back shoulder thick. Steady that guy right there and let that everybody else kind of rally. And then everybody is going. Now, what I always tell my guys in sprint out, if I'm the DB, I'm latching on my receiver. Unless they're pressing to the sideline, it's some sort of smash concept. And I'm the corner, and I know that nickel's coming out right now. I know that nickel's working out right now. because we see that too. We get the comeback with the corner. Very rarely do they throw the corner route. Normally that's such a long throw, and because of the sprint out motion, you have time to rally. But I want that corner sitting on top of it. I want that backer sitting underneath of it. I don't need the backer on the line of scrimmage taking an arrow route that's going 1 yard. Especially this in the red zone. It'd be a little different if it was like 3rd and 3, and they're trying to run that arrow and they're kind of just moving the pocket to get that throw, get that guy out there. But I think on a typical normal down, and they're just running a sprint out, I want that Mike linebacker to go hit that running back, and I want that nickel to expand all the way with some vision and try and see that comeback behind them, or that hitch where they're trying to attack that space, and really have that corner kind of play that midpoint like you normally would on a smash concept.
Have you ever? I've seen some match quarters team in the area, and it's probably more of the saving match quarter cover 7. But have you ever had that strong safety rob the second level, like say if you got flood? Would you ever have that safety if you read sprint out, rob the second level, corner takes deep level, and then apex player takes flat?
Yeah, no, I mean, like if we're in regular quarters, like if it's a regular let's say it's 2x2, and they're running sprint out to the two receiver side, then yeah, that's normally how that would end up taking. That safety's I tell the safety, you got to go cap that sail route right now. Nickel's going to try and sail underneath of the sail route. He's going to try and get underneath of it, midpoint it, and force that low throw. And then obviously the corner's going to take that in mod coverage right there, which is man outside deep. So anytime he's going to get a fade, he's going to take that. So to me, I think that's important for that safety. I also teach my safeties, if you see an outside stem by number 1, if you feel that outside stem and you take a peek and he's outside those numbers and we're in quarters, there's no reason you're not going to ever make a play on that fade route. I tell my guys all the time, the corner signed up to play the fade. That's what the corners do. I'm a corner. I played corner my entire life. Man, if I could defend fades all day, man, that's awesome. I gotta go make it a track meet. I'm a fast white guy, so I didn't mind running. So to me, that's to me as a corner, that's what you signed up for. So for the safeties, it's like, look, if you get that outside release, go ahead and start capping that number 2 receiver, whether it's a 5 yard out and I'm kind of running the banana, trying to meet him on the outside with the nickel coming, or I'm trying to go cap that sail route right now and make that quarterback make a really good throw, especially if that nickel expands and gets underneath of it. Again, I don't want the nickel diving down on that arrow route. Think about it. If you talk to any coach in America that plays offense, the arrow route is just the kind of the check down. They don't. That's the last thing. And most guys, if it's a running quarterback and they're playing, that guy's not even in their read progression. It's high, mid, run. Yeah. And that's it. And even then, if they're running a fade route on it, it's usually mid, run. If the sail ain't there or you don't feel comfortable, run. So it's a one thing read. And then obviously if you give the fade up, that's a gift. So to me, that's what I want that nickel. I want that nickel to make that quarterback have to throw a really good ball, and we want to sandwich that mid-range throw, which is that's kind of the sweet spot for a lot of quarterbacks, especially at the high school level.
Now, I kind of want to hit, because we just talked doubles there. How many trips, whether it be sprint out or under just regular drop back, how many trips coverages do you carry game to game, or adjustments? I should phrase it probably that way. That'd probably be a little bit better.
It really depends on the team. And I say, I know it sounds like I'm running away from the question, but it really does depend on the team and what they're trying to do. Are they trying to 2-3 switch? Do they throw to the number 1 receiver? How are they trying to attack you on that? We usually will carry about 2 or 3 into a game, but I tell guys all the time, everything in our playbook, I can call at any moment. The kids know it. And so if we get into a situation, maybe we haven't repped something for a lot, I can say, hey, here, this is what we want to do here. And the kids will be able to know it. But normally if we're just going into a game, we're probably going to have some sort of we're going to run stress. I think everybody knows what I do and kind of what my baby is with the trips coverages. And then, obviously that stubby special is there too, especially if 2 and 3 get close together. I'm never going to let you give there's certain situations where you're going to check out of things. The kids know it. We have split rules, whether it's regular coverage or not. I let the kids call the coverage, so we go into the game, and we have an idea and a game plan of what we're going to see, what we're going to get. We've already repped it through practice, so that's kind of where I stand on coverages. Just I don't want to carry a whole bunch into the game. Now, obviously, that doesn't count like our blitz coverages and things like that, but we're only going to carry in 2 or 3 tops. I don't want the kids bogged down with a bunch of stuff.
Now, you mentioned players calling coverages errors, and that's something me and Coach Derry have also talked before privately, is about checking coverages based off formations or situations. What is your preference there in terms of how you want them to call the coverage? Is it based formation? Is there a situational aspect there? Is it a player? Okay, player X is here is now number 2. Or does that vary week to week?
Yeah, we'll vary week to week, especially if they have a dude that we know we need to get the double on, or we need to cap him. We can change the coverage that week to fit what we need right there. But to me, it's alignment and kind of the splits of the receivers and letting the kids do it. Look, to me, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm not going to double call stuff. I'm not going to say, hey, I want this if it's 2x2. I want this if it's 3x1. Or I want this if the back's here. I want this if the back's not there. I think you start getting into trouble if you do that. I want the kids to have some sort of I want them to have some sort of autonomy within what we're doing. I think there's more buy-in that way. I think they become more intuitive when you take the reins off of them. They learn the system better. I'll never forget at Midlothian. I mean, it was nice that my last year at Midlothian, my school I was at previous to Mesquite Horn, I mean, I had those kids since they were freshmen. So they, 2 of them had started as freshmen for me, and the others had been there when they were sophomores. So it's like as they grew into it, like that last year, I mean, we were game planning together. Hey, what do you feel about this? What do you feel about that? Hey, coach, I checked to this. Is that okay? It's like, yeah, so I think if you approach it that way, eventually you can have that college-like conversations at the high school level. And I think coaches are always afraid to give their players a little bit more.
I agree with that.
And to me, I've just always felt like I want to have an open conversation about what we're doing. I'm a teacher by trade. So to me, it's like we want to learn and grow from these. I'm setting you up so that eventually we can kind of be, on the same level. We can have a conversation about coverages. I mean, I'll never forget we're playing a team, and they came out in that very first series, and they knew that we were trapping the corner really hard on screens. We had done it all year. And they decided, okay, we're going to run bubbles, but we're going to run curls behind it underneath that safety. And they had hit us a few times on it. And so we got off the field, and my corner comes back and he says, hey, can we squat it right here? And I was like, exactly. I didn't even have to communicate that to him. He had already thought of it while the game was going on. And to me, I was like, that's exactly what I was going to say. So it was like, of course, yes, let's go ahead and do that. We did that again. And then they didn't, that play was dead for them. They kept trying to come back to it, and it wasn't there. So to me, it's like when you finally get to that place, like when you just let go and you let the kids kind of be part of the process and not just pawns and I'm, like I said earlier, I'm different the way that I approach things. I'm a little bit more liberal in the sense that I want to have a communication with it. I'm not a big authoritarian guy. I live in the gray. I mean, I think when you play in the secondary and you're a secondary guy, you live in the gray half the time anyway. I mean, so to me, that's where I live in. So I'm not going to make things black and white for the kids, because I think when you start doing that, if you set strict rules, then the kids are going to do those rules. If you kind of give them some autonomy, then that's when they can really unlock their athleticism and their instincts and things like that.
I kind of want to hit on that more, because I think that's something, and I'm a big Jocko guy, and he talked about decentralized command. And I think some of the things, even as a DC I do, is if my D-line coach thinks that if we're playing an under front, instead of going to a 3, that 4-eye is the better for that game, go ahead and make that adjustment. I don't even care. You know what I mean? Because conceptually, as long as he's, containing that, whatever. But I think I mean, I think I've had some similar situations, and I can't stress it enough, of talking to your players in games in a manner of just like, so what do you see? And like, you talk about, I think, I will always say DBs is like an art. You know what I mean? There's a million different techniques out there that are so specifically unique for certain situations. But like when you go out and teach your kids why you're doing a certain technique, and I think this is kind of where kids are getting a lot better now, is that why aspect. Why are we doing this, coach? And if you can really understand why you're doing it, not just because your coach taught it to you when you were in college and high school, it's because like when you get this situation, we got to be able to do this. So that way you don't have to alter scheme, you alter a technique.
Right.
And I think you're just like, hey, and like you said, then they understand why they're doing it. They're going to squat really well because they understand the importance of it. And I think that you kind of, I can't tell you how many times, just teaching different techniques and run fits. And they're just like, coach, this isn't working. Is it all right if I just do this? Yeah. So I'm not out there trying to make a tackle.
Right.
And if I was, I probably wouldn't even come close to making it. So I said, do what you got to do. You know what I mean? I said,
Yeah.
I give you, we give you a toolbox, use it. But I think that's that decentralized command is just like, to me, it's just like it's an umbrella, right? You got, okay, like obviously you can't just do whatever you want, call your defense whatever you want, but there's an umbrella and there's adjustment periods to where like, if you delegate that work to your assistant coaches, you delegate that work to your kids out there, they're going to feel more empowered in that mission. I mean, okay, I got this, coach. This is a way better technique, or coach, I understand your thought process on that, but this is a better chat for it because this is what they're trying to do. And then at that point, man, it's more of I think in today's world, you got to be more colleague with your kids than you do coaches. You know what I mean? Kids want to partner with, they want to be inclusive. It's a lot more inclusive environment coaching. I mean, I never in a million years when I played football would ever question a certain technique a coach had me do or scheme. But I kind of wish I did. Well, we probably wouldn't have been so bad, you know what I mean? So it's just like, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of like one of those things where I think that's a hell of an approach. And I kind of hope that becomes a lot more mainstream because at the end of the day, we're not playing.
Right.
And I think if you're teaching kids how to be great football players and situationally aware in practice, and I think the only way you can get situationally aware in practice is practicing techniques for it, you know what I mean? And
and putting them in game-like situations.
Yeah. And so it's a hell of an approach, and I kind of hope our listeners kind of get that. It's not about what you know, it's about what your kids know.
Yeah, and I've got a great example. I had 2 Division I corners this year. I had a kid that went to UTEP, and I got a kid that went to SFA. And one could do the feather technique, which if anybody knows, has followed me at all, cloud, cover to read stuff, I teach what's called a feather, just kind of that mere motor with the feet. And then the other one couldn't do it. He couldn't do feather technique. Like the kid's 6'2", 185 pounds. I think he's going to end up playing in the NFL if he keeps his head on straight and he does. I mean, I think he will, but I think we'll be seeing him play in the NFL. But he is a kick stepper. He can't. Feather technique just wasn't going to work for him, And I think a lot of guys are like, well, this is the technique I want in this. Well, it was very evident within the first week that I was there. And remember, I didn't get a spring with these kids. I barely got a summer, but it was very evident in the first week. I was like, this is going to work. We got to fix this for him. And so hey, what about let's try the kick step? Yeah. Which is kind of like Richard Sherman made the kick step really, really popular, which is similar to the way that we slide out in our quarters coverage sky. And so he started doing that and you could just see him getting more comfortable. He felt more comfortable the more time. When he felt comfortable, he got more confident. And then that confidence started building towards the end of the year. By the end of the year, he was a really, really good player for us. I mean, obviously he's a Division I football player. So I think to me, that's a prime example of where I've been in a situation where, hey, this works for kid A. This doesn't work for kid B. we've got to do something different. I'll never forget, even at Baylor, we had Xavier Howard who was playing for the Dolphins. He's one of the best corners in the NFL. He can do whatever you want him to do. You want him to feather, you want him to slide, you want him to do kicks, he can do it. We had Dimitri Goodson who played for the Packers for a while. He couldn't slide and he couldn't do kick step and he couldn't feather. He just couldn't do it. But the kid could backpedal. So, it was like, you're the only one that can backpedal. Because I don't think people understand how difficult backpedaling actually is and how much of a skill it is. But this kid could do it, but he could backpedal. He was a starting point guard at Gonzaga and decided he didn't want to play basketball anymore. He wanted to play football. And so he came to Baylor and he started at corner for us. And he's one of the few kids that I've been around that could do everything from a backpedal. So to me, I think, like you said, you got to give them a toolbox, and you as a coach have to have that toolbox of different ways of tinkering with things and saying, okay, this didn't work for you, but this worked for you. Let's try this technique, because in our job is to make them successful. To me, I've always said this, Mac, I don't put, I'm not going to put those two guys on my resume. They were Division I football players, but they were probably going to be Division I football players whether I was there or not.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't put kids on my resume, so my job is to make sure that they are successful and they get to be where they want, or they get that step. Maybe I could push them a little bit higher than what they thought that they could go. That's my job. So give them the tools to do that.
Well, that goes back to the old.
Are you able to play quarters versus Trey sets at all?
Quarters versus Trey. What's your Trey?
Tight end to the twin side.
Yeah, we would play quarters over 1 and 2, and then you could poach or you could lock the mic on the tight end depending on what they were doing.
Okay. That was some of the stuff I was looking at too, because we get a lot of 11 personnel. And, I get easily manipulated because I just kind of roll down and play cover 3. My base rule is I'm a 3-4 guy. If you have a tight end, you reduce down to it. And so, but then you'd have to, my rule is if you reduce down, either we go to quarter, half, because we got to have a flat player, or we got to roll down to cover 3. So we have a flat player on both sides and the other guy's apex. But either way, anytime it was Trey, we just locked cover 3. And a lot of teams started playing that against us this year, and it was not fun.
Yeah, if you're a 4 end and set the 3 technique away from the tight end, get into an under front, and then now you got to be in a C-gap player. It allows that safety to be a kind of that poach player on that tight end. So that way he's not just kicking over there all the time, that he can actually run that alley on the backside. And that keeps you out of that quarter, half. Now, if the tight end's a glorified tackle, just lock the mic on him, and then you're still in an under front. So, you can do different things like that. But, yeah, we run quarters to Trey.
Now, you mentioned earlier about naming blitzes and coverages. Now, when you are doing your, blitz packages with coverages, do you have a one-word call for the blitz and the coverage, or is that two separate things? And do you try to family those, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so they're in families. We'll have our cover 1 pressures, and then we'll have our zone pressures, and they'll have a different name. If we want to be single high or we want to be too high, they'll have a different name. And then obviously we're going to play it as it is, and the nice thing about it is we can switch that week to week, hey, we're playing cover 1 this week, and then the next week we can manipulate it depending on the pressure, obviously, what it is. Is it 2 inside guys going? Is it an outside and inside guy going? That changes the kind of the dichotomy there a little bit. At mid-low, if we were sending an in and an outside guy, we just didn't even change the coverage. The kids just knew that if my overhang's gone, we're given a mix call. Means that we're mixing it up, so it's basically turns it into man.
Yeah.
I might have help from the sling backer or somebody that's coming to, but I may or may not help. But what it did is it allowed them to stay in our base. I could play too high without, even though we were having a 5-man rush, I could still play too high concepts. We just played man match on one side and we played zone on the other. Yeah. Where I'm at now, we're good at man coverage. And so we've got a ton of athletes. And so we were a little bit more man heavy this year than zone heavy. That's because that's what our kids were just better at. Yeah. The way that we structure that, if it's a base call, if we're only sending 4, then or 5, depending on that week, That's where it gets hairy, is in 5-man pressures. Do we want to run fire zone? Do we run on cover one, or do we want to run half field zone? And I've been at, schools that every time we sent 5, we played fire zone. And then at Midlothian, it was, we're only going to play half field zone because we're never going to get out of our quarters. We don't want outside backers carrying the seams because we didn't have outside backers that could actually run. We were a 7-man front, and we had 4 DBs. Now the 4 DBs were awesome. So it was like, we're going to play as much man as we possibly can. And then here at Horn, it was, now we can be a little bit more multiple in our approach because we kind of are a hybrid 3 safety look. So we can kind of be a little bit more different. But yeah, going back to that, I think it's important that you put them in families. These are fire zones. These are our man free. These are our zones, I think it makes it easier for the kids. And then also you can kind of change it this week. Like, hey, instead of running it this way, we're going to run it this way. Okay.
And then I have 2 more questions for you. Derry might have a couple more too. And what is, for me, I'm always curious of how people teach things. So what is your typical practice in terms of drills and structure look like to maximize your time with your kids?
Yeah, so COVID actually was, as much bad that came out of it, I think that it really has pushed coaches to evaluate time management within practice and how are we doing practicing? How can we really amplify the limited amount of time that we have? One thing that I dropped this year was my daily must footwork stuff. My kids are really good at footwork. I don't have to constantly keep going back at it. And I kind of look back at Midlothian and I'm like, man, my kids were really good at footwork there. How much time, but we were so advanced that we didn't necessarily, it could take us really quick to work through schematics. So we were constantly making sure maybe we were doing some more footwork, but that daily must, well, when I got the Horn, I got about 4 weeks into the season. I'm like, I've got to cover so much stuff, and we've got so many issues because we're still like the inconsistencies of kids being there. Are they in quarantine? Are they hurt? Are they coming back? It just was.
You don't get spring either. A lot of that is huge.
Right. We didn't have a spring. We didn't have a summer. So to me, the one thing that our kids are really good at and what they did all summer was footwork drills. So to me, we were already so far ahead footwork wise because that's all they could do. That's all they could do. That was it from the moment the shutdown happened all the way up until August when we were back in football. All they could do was footwork. They couldn't, they could do some one-on-ones with their friends and stuff, but we couldn't actually work on anything schematic. So we were behind in that sense, especially with me being new. They had run some of the stuff that we had been doing, but we were trying to do some other things. We had inexperienced players. We were very young this year. And so to me, it was like, why am I just beating a dead horse? Like, why am I'm sitting here doing these daily musts that I've done forever. I've done for 10 years. Why am I still doing them? And I dropped them this year and then focused more on kind of like week to week. What do we need? Fixing what happened last week. What do we need specifically this week? Scenarios that we're going to see, try making them more game-like. I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I've done in the past couple of years and has really accelerated the growth of some of the kids that I've had is try and put them in game-like situations, try and do more than one thing. If you're just running routes on air, that's not really for DBs. Like to me, if we're just kind of running routes on air, that's not great. Let's get their eyes right. I want a quarterback. I'm lucky enough this year at Horn, I was able to have a corners coach who's really good, Cam Onick. And he would be the quarterback. I would sit behind everybody, and then he's watching their eyes. I'm watching their feet, and then the pattern match. And then it's like, okay, now we've got, he's saying, hey, your eyes weren't on me. They were too quick. Or, hey, we're not reading. He can see them reading the receivers. And so to me, I think that's kind of the progression that we kind of got to this year. And it's something that I'll probably change as we go forward is like, really asking yourself, do I need to do this or am I just doing this to check a box? And if you're just doing this to check a box, then you need to find something else because you're wasting their time. You're wasting your own time. So to me, practice planning, that was kind of what it is. What I do, there are some things that I always do that I think are important. I do think we run quarters. That's what we do. And I think even if you're a man team and you're working some man match things, you've got to work those matches. You've got to work those pattern reads, and you've got to work those fits, because not everything, again, like I've said, you live in the gray as a DB. You can't just say, okay, well, that guy's at 5 yards. I need to clamp down on it. Or, hey, he went here, so I could go here. It changes every week, and the break points change every week depending on the offense. So to me, doing those patterns, running the patterns that they're going to see, putting them in scenarios where they're going to see, is something that, for me, that I'm going to do every week. But I'm always going to ask, is this game like? Am I just checking a box? Can I add something in it to make it more game-like? And on top of that, don't go down the rabbit hole of trying to do 5 things at the same time, where now the kids are doing so much that they're not getting anything out of the drill. I think you need to have 2 or 3 things that you're trying to accomplish in a drill, do it, make it game-like, and then move on to the next thing.
Okay, and then last thing I got for you is, all of us study stuff in the off season and look at stuff, but how do you personally study? And then do you have a preference on who you like to study? How much does that change each year? Who are you studying now?
I've really gotten into analytics lately, and and not just like, I think people say analytics and some coaches roll their eyes. I think that there are some things that we can look at objectively towards the end of the year, and that we could say, hey, this is what really is a good defense. I think it's harder for high school. Like, I was having a conversation with a couple coaches. I posted something about doing EPA, which is expected points. It's hard at the high school level because we don't have the data and the box scores just over, like, for instance, here in Texas, we play on a college field. So the field's different for different places. So it's kind of difficult to sit there and say, hey, is this the same as college? It's probably not. Now, 6A Texas is probably the closest thing. There's probably a couple leagues in different places in Georgia and California and Florida that are probably, hey, you could probably get close. But again, we play on a college field. And so I try and do some things analytically and look, okay, college-wise, who's similar to what we're doing. And then I try and find who's doing more with less. And then who are the top defenses. I try and stay away from looking at people that, like, I'm not, I think I'm going to say someone's going to get mad, but I'm not going to sit and just watch every clip of a Saban defense. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to, and the reason why I'm not going to do that is because they've got players that I'm never going to have. I'm not going to have 11 of them that are like that. Yeah. Now I'm gonna watch those games, but I'm not gonna break them down. And I think too, a lot of times, like for me, because I'm also an author and I gotta put things out there that people want to see. I think that there are enough people that know that system. So I'm looking for different things. I'm looking for, going back to the original. We can either all do the same thing, or I could try and be different. And for me, I'm always, I'm trying to be different. So I'm looking at more things like this year. I was obsessed with Cincinnati. I thought Cincinnati, what they were doing on defense was so unique and was so awesome. And the way that they were doing it and they were using their personnel was really good. The Rams, the way that Brandon Staley was using Aaron Donald and Ramsey as leverage players to kind of play with these light boxes. I mean, some of this stuff was just insane. What they were doing in the front, like you're playing 5 defensive linemen with a backer that is literally stacked in a 50 technique. And you're like, there's no one in the gap. There's no one in there. But then you remember they got Aaron Donald on the other side.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, because you hit the nail on the head. Because I turn on the Rams game, because I usually don't watch any football until the season's over. And I turned into a Rams game. It was like prime time, and I'm like watching it. I said, what the hell is going on here? I said, like, they have like a 5-man box to like 11 personnel.
Yeah.
And then I go box, I'm like, all right. But I said, it's amazing.
And they were the best defense in the NFL this year, hands down, not even close. And so to me,
they would have made a run if Donald didn't get hurt too. I mean, that threw a kind of a. I mean, I don't want to say they sold out, but I mean that was a huge reason why they were doing what they were doing, and he wasn't as effective. But that was about as fun as a defense as I've ever seen. Because I started watching a lot more Rams game after that. I was just kind of amazed at how much they were able to do with just two superstars.
Yeah, and to me, that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm looking at with what are teams doing that are just like it's off the wall crazy. Like the Rams were such an anomaly. The Broncos again, such an anomaly. They're running a bunch of too high stuff at like 80%, and nobody else is doing that. Okay, why are they doing that? I'm interested in that. I think what Shiano did at Rutgers this year, running a lot of the tilt front, which is under front. I'm always interested in that because that's kind of my home base, Northwestern. So to me, I'm always going to find anybody that's running a really good 4-3 defense. I'm going to find them and I'm going to watch them because that's like my first love. And then off of that, that's kind of what I'm looking at. I look at analytics and I'm trying to find out what are some teams that are doing some things. I think what Jim Leonard's doing at Wisconsin is fantastic, especially when you look at, they don't punch real high in recruiting in terms of they're not getting the same kind of guys that like Ohio State is getting, the Georgias, the Alabamas, but what they're able to do defensively is just insane. And I think what they're doing with their kind of the simulated pressures and the creepers and the different ways that he's getting into that stuff, I think is really unique. Obviously I'm a Baylor guy, so I'm gonna pay attention to Aranda now that he's down here and closer to me. And I think to me, that's what I'm interested in. Venables is always interesting to watch. He does some crazy stuff with his quarters, which I can always get with crazy, especially in the quarters world. When you start saying quarters tags and it's different, I'm like, okay, I'm in. I can sit, mad scientist, this stuff. So I try and do that stuff. And then obviously I visit Iowa State every year, and by visit I mean I watch them every year. I touch them every year because I think when you go, you want to go back to kind of the people that they're not the original people that ran that kind of that 3-3-3, but I do think that they kind of brought it to kind of the light of day to everybody. So that's kind of when I sit down and look, I'm kind of, what are people talking about? What am I seeing that I think is interesting? I think Georgia has some of the most diverse pressure packages and just alignments and things that they're doing. Dan Lanning does a great job, and so to me, I'm watching guys like that. I want unique. I want kind of outside the box thinking, and then obviously on the back end, what are people interested in, and trying to find out, hey, why are so many people interested in this, and then kind of bringing a different perspective and making it digestible for people.
That's perfect, Coach. And honestly, I think that's a great way to end this. I don't think we'll have a better ending than that. So, kind of as we wrap up here, coaches, his Twitter will be below. Make sure you give him a follow if for some reason you're one of like the 5 coaches who have not followed him on Twitter. He has some things on YouTube. Again, that's not his big passion, but I know he's got a couple things on there if you want to check that out as well. I'll put the link for his channel down below. And then also, if you don't have any of his books or missing 1 or 2 of the 5. A link to his books will be below in the bio as well. Make sure you check those out for Coach. If you want to learn more about his stuff, either just like I said, follow him on Twitter, look at the books, look at the YouTube channel for him. Same thing, we can give Coach Derry a follow. He helps out with our channel a lot, and by the time this comes,
I'm like 15,000 followers short of Coach Alexander. So get me up to speed here, guys.
Minor details, Coach. So, and Coach Derry will just by the time this comes out, we'll have had his second clinic for our channel come out as well. Make sure you check that out for our 1-year anniversary back in March. So, coaches, thank you again, and that was another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.